Hey, welcome back to the show. Just over 72 hours till the start of the second test, Australia v India in Adelaide, as I welcome Gerard Whateley into the studio. Hello, Gerard.
Jules, hello.
It's always a big test match. Any test match Australia plays in Australia, but this one feels like it's one of the bigger ones we've had for quite some time off the back of, what happened last summer at times and what happened in Perth.
Yeah, it's an early flashpoint that Australia has sort of condemned itself to by playing so poorly in Perth. And everything Travis Head says is right, is good teams find resolve and they fight back in these moments and they win the next game. So that's clearly the assignment for Australia, is to level the series up, because we are not the holders of the trophy.
That's right.
To go 2-0 down is to virtually be in a position where there's no chance of winning it. I don't see Australia winning 3 tests in a row after going 2-0 down. So it's must win in Adelaide. Is take the weather out. There's a little bit of weather around on Friday. Is a pink ball test is highly unlikely to be a draw. So if you're talking a result, it's must win territory for Australia immediately.
Just going, before we get stuck into the next test and things that have happened between the last test and the next test, just going back to Perth, Jasprit Bumrah's spell in the first innings. I remember as a kid growing up fearing Curtly Ambrose.
Yes.
The way he used to bowl and just terrorise us. I mean, where do you rate that spell you've seen from a touring fast bowler in our country?
Yeah, it was an instant classic, and had Kohli hung on to Marnus and he'd got 4 in the first 3 overs, it would have been an all-timer. So we were thinking that the flashpoints immediately are Richard Hadlee and Curtly Ambrose in my imagination. And probably the raw numbers don't quite get this there, but anyone who watched it will remember it. And as an opening volley in a series for what might happen is if Bumrah is the defining figure of the series, that it will be enhanced, I think, as it goes along. And I just think it struck a certain modern day terror, if you like, not fear. Not fear for safety.
That's right.
But volatility and the risk of your wicket as soon as you get to the middle. And there's no point pretending that he's not the best bowler in the world, because he is. He is highly unusual, so it presents a challenge for each of the batters to find a way. I thought he was really clever in the 4th innings not to bowl too much. The last thing he wants to do is let Australia practice against him in the formative stages of the tour. So he came back into the attack. He nicked off Head and then he went back out of the attack. That was just clever, I thought. And probably the fear in this game is that we saw in 2 late sessions. So the first session of day 1, 2.5 hours, 7 wickets, 23 minutes, 3 wickets. Is if Bumrah gets Australia in the twilight with the pink ball, that's where the game is. What might he do in that hour? I think that's probably what we'll live in fear of in this test match.
So we know Josh Hazlewood's out with the side strain. Scott Boland we expect to come into the side. Would you have played him in the PM's 11? Or?
Yes, he needed to bowl. So I think this is part of the issue. The Australians looked chronically underdone, probably planning for the 5th day of the 5th test match. Yes, Boland he probably needed a little bit more work than he got, in all honesty. So he's not a surprise bowler. He's just a good bowler.
Yeah.
He's a metronome. So it doesn't matter how much he bowls to India. He will either be able to take wickets against them or not. He is like Hazlewood from that point of view. So I'm in no fear of that. The trick with Boland, he's not really a backup player. So I'm not quite sure what Hazlewood's trajectory through the rest of the series is. But Boland would play Adelaide and Melbourne, and somebody else would play Brisbane.
Yeah.
He definitely wouldn't play 3 tests in a row, and I doubt that he would play the back-to-back test matches. So he's performed well with the pink ball before, and Melbourne's his go. So somebody else for Brisbane, and this is where the Nisa injury is such a blow, because I reckon quietly in the background it was Nisa, Brisbane, Boland, Melbourne, and then rest whoever needed to be rested, and that changes with the Hazlewood injury.
So who is it? Is it Doggett? Is it Abbott?
I presume it's Abbott. So before Boland made his debut, this is where there is a lot of overreaction going on. I get that. I'm probably part of the first wave of it. But right back when Boland first got selected, for a period of time, Abbott was ahead of him in the pecking order. And then circumstances changed. Boland got his chance and he bowled his way into folklore. So he's been Australia's reserve bowler. He bowled in the World Test Championship. But Abbott was right there. So I would imagine that Brisbane would be Abbott.
You mentioned the reaction there, and it's been strong since that first test, and as you say, you've been strong as well. Why so strong? I don't think that's just the reaction from you off the back of one test result.
No, that's right. It wasn't 3 days of cricket. This is the accumulation of last summer, which was a really unconvincing summer. If you do the analysis, and we obviously live through it every day, but the 7 test matches, Australia was thoroughly unconvincing against far lesser teams and also missed the opportunity to future-proof the team. That wasn't taken. And so all of the same questions out of last summer were present coming into this summer. And right at the forefront of it is batting collapses. And keep rattling off the same numbers, which are unavoidable. So it wasn't a surprise that Australia collapsed twice in Perth. This, unfortunately, is right at the heart of what they are at the moment. Damien Fleming talks about the engine room of the top 3, and Australia can't get runs out of the top 3. It's relied on one innings here and there, and quite often that's been a match-winning innings, which is a great quality within a team, but that's not going to cut it long-term against the best team in the world. So, yeah, there was a risk that would happen this summer. And then Australia's cricket was shoddy. If we're really honest, it was shoddy. Wides, no balls, byes, missed fields, missed run-outs, missed catches. That's not how we expect Australia to play, and that's not how really they expect to play when they're at their best. So I think that goes to preparation. So do the work and sharpen up. Win in Adelaide, play convincing cricket, and reset the series. You
mentioned the future-proofing there. I guess particularly talking about the batting, playing devil's advocate, can you make the argument it's hard to future-proof if there's not enough guys knocking down the door to come into that test team?
Yeah, I hear a lot of that, and I do understand it to a degree, but I don't think Australia has no cricketers. I just think they haven't been exposed to the level. There are players throughout this Shield season who have had good moments. There are certainly over the past 3 seasons enough there that other choices might have been made, and you might have given some exposure and tested guys at the level, see who rises to it and see who it's above. The World Test Championship complicates that to a degree because every test match is given weighting, which is great. But I still, and there's no hindsight in this. I said this right throughout last summer. Australia wasted 7 test matches where they might have done a bit of future proofing, and they might have answered some of their questions, and they might have unearthed test quality players who were ready. So I'm not in the catastrophizing camp that there are no cricketers in the country. I think Bo Webster is quite ready to make his test debut. And I think he would have a good chance of succeeding. I think Josh Inglis is in the sort of form, if you line it up against Alex Carey. Carey batted well in his 2 innings in Perth. Inglis is batting just as well as him. I think he is ready for the exposure, and I think he would be every chance of succeeding. And I think it's a little bit deeper than that. So the Shield numbers have contracted in the same way that Test numbers have contracted. So I'm not in the school of there are no good cricketers in Australia.
Well, there's not going to be any change to the batting lineup by the sound of it for this second test.
No.
How's that going to wash with Australian cricket fans, particularly around Marnus, whose form's been very poor?
He needs to make runs.
It's last chance, isn't it? It has to be.
Well, yes, it has to be. So a lot of things will happen if Australia fails in the same way and loses and goes 2-0 down, then everything changes. If Australia straightens up and wins and 1-1, we could be in for one of the great summers. So both of those possibilities are in play. So I understand not throwing all your plans out after one game, but the thing is it's not one game. Marnus doesn't look like he's about to make runs. So I feel like, that's everybody's reputations are on the line. If you go with it again, it would want to work for him and for everyone else who's making the decisions. And the team desperately needs it. The team needs Marnus. So he averages 64 in pink ball cricket. Play to your average, mate, because the team needs those runs right now.
Should he have been left out before now?
No, I think he should be. I would have dropped him for this match. Here's where we are. You don't look like you're about to make a run. Inglis is in great form. And I would distill it down to, I think cricket gets totally confused that it's an awful failing and a sacking and an axing. Other nations nimbly change their team from test to test without it being a big deal. Who is likely to make runs for Australia in this test match? Marnus Labuschagne or Josh Inglis? Well, I think the weight of runs this season says Inglis. So that's where I would have gone. And I wouldn't have boiled it any further than that. So go back and play a shield game. Play as if your career's on the line, because it is. And then we'll see in Brisbane.
So why are we so reluctant to do that in Australian cricket? Because you often on the temper text you'll get it's harder to get out of the team than get into the team.
And that's always been the cliche, hasn't it? So it's an ingrained part of Australian cricket, but it's not what happens elsewhere. Is India will make more changes than Australia from test match to test match. They don't fear it. England shuffle their team around quite routinely. So we have players have ownership over their position in the Australian order, and it's a cultural phenomenon. My point is there has to be some accountability around that. So stability and support goes this far, and then if you don't perform, there's some accountability around selection. So that's where I think we are. Marnus goes out, makes a century, no worries. Then everyone will go, that's why stability and support works. Marnus goes out and fail, and you go, you've created an environment that protects mediocrity. So we're sort of at this philosophical moment in time, and we get an empirical answer. He will either make runs or he won't, and that'll be the answer.
So a lot of focus on the batting, as you say, and going back even to last summer, and I guess our bowling group has got us out of trouble a lot. So you mentioned there it was sloppy in that second innings in particular. Now Josh Hazlewood is injured. One off the temper text here saying if you look at Pat Cummins' last sort of 14, 15 tests, it hasn't been amazing. So is there any concerns over this bowling group that is ageing, that maybe they're just falling off their best as well?
I don't think they're at the end, but with aging sportsmen, injury happens more regularly. So what we're seeing with Hazlewood is more likely to happen from here on. Stark will get a niggle, Hazlewood will get a niggle, because that's just the natural trajectory. Boland is older than that pair, so he's our next bowler. Nisa, unfortunate injury. They've always been waiting on Jai Richardson, who is afflicted by injury. And then there's probably a question around the bowlers in their mid-20s. So from what I gather, the teenagers coming through look really good. Who are the bowlers in their mid-20s who are going to grow into it? So we saw Spencer Johnson in the one day. And this is where I think Australia has done a good job. They use white ball international exposure for red ball readiness, and well, they should. So does he progressively come through? Yeah, I think, again, last summer, 7 test matches, our 4 bowlers played all 7 test matches. No hindsight to this. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
That was a mistake. There was an opportunity to manoeuvre that around, but again, is occupancy and the protection of that position. That is a cultural cornerstone of Australian cricket. I wouldn't have used last summer like that. And you might have more answers. You'd certainly have more exposure as we hit this summer. But unless Australia got hit by massive injury, I think this series will make enough sense. Boland is there. Abbott's the next man in because Nisa's injured. Doggett goes around the group, and then we'll see you down the track. And he bowled well in those Australia A games.
Before we wrap up, the pink ball test in Adelaide, where does it sort of rate in terms of test matches you look forward to?
Yeah, so it's my favourite test match of the year. And I think to those who have been, it's the best overall experience. So Boxing Day is incredibly special, and that's the showpiece day. But Adelaide is the perfect town for this. That's what the AFL unlocked with Gather Round, but it's what Test cricket has always known. The pilgrimage to go to the Adelaide Test, all the social activity around it, what they have out the side of the members is just so clever. It's incredibly well supported and cherished in the town. I love the pink ball. I know some of the players are still reluctant about it, but it changes the dynamic of the game. Absolutely. So it's got intrigue within it, and then it's got the spectacle, the sun setting, and it's the best test match on the calendar.
Can't wait. Gerard, thanks for popping in. We can't wait for it to get underway on Friday.
No worries. Head there tomorrow.